exciting.
How is everyone doing? So, Strength Chat episode 27. This is our bi-yearly meet, the man that needs no introduction, Mr. Chris Kershaw.
Hello,
what have you
Steve.
been up to recently?
What have I been up to recently? I've been trying my very, very best to not hurt anyone in the gym.
It's always a bonus.
I've been trying to keep my clients and everything happy, and that seems to be going quite well. Getting towards fully booked with my coaching services, which has been really cool, so I've been able to focus on some business stuff, and then we've been looking at some business mentoring, and then from there had the opportunity to do a talk called All Day Here, which was a tech industry event where I got to talk to loads of developers that have never touched a weight in their life and tell them that they should be touching a load of weights and lifting a lot regularly to help with their mental health. And then something that we'll touch on in a little bit, I've got another mental health talk coming up in a couple of weeks where I'm going to address the subject of sleep deprivation and how that can affect both performance and mental health, and then just seeing where that goes from there, whether we do more talks, whether we go on tour, and just seeing what other opportunities come up. Really.
Lads on top.
Yeah, exactly.
So basically, what I want to chat to today, obviously you said about you are going and you've been doing talks about mental health, and how getting into the gym and training isn't just about, right, how much weight have I got on the bar, am I going to go and get on the platform and compete in powerlifting, or am I going to improve whatever it may be within the world of strength, put more muscle mass on or anything like that.
Yeah.
Why do you think that the other aspects of sleep, mental health, and feeling a little bit better, why is strength training important for that? Do they go hand in hand, or why is that such a big thing?
Well, I think if I address strength training and how that can affect mental health without considering sleep, I think that's just a little bit different.
Okay.
Because if you're not sleeping very well, then the strength training won't be as beneficial for the mental health because of some of the stuff that I mentioned. But I think with strength training, you're coming into the gym to get stronger, you're working towards a plan, and you don't feel like you're without a rudder, you don't feel like you're lost, you're working towards something, you're making yourself stronger. So that's one reason why I think it's so much more beneficial, because that person is in working on themselves, and that's a really big thing. Also, it feels great to lift more and more weight every single week. It feels really good to move better, it feels really good to be consistent with something and to be in a habit. I think a lot of the time, people that suffer with mental health problems feel that their life is complete chaos. And when they come into the gym 4 times a week, and or 3 times or 2 times or whatever, that's one habit that they can maintain. And I think that's very, very important. So just by following that one habit, they can then follow it up with another habit. Maybe that's having a protein shake at the end of each workout. Maybe it's eating a pre-workout meal, something like that. So I feel that strength training helps to build structure into someone's life, and that can instill a lot more mental fortitude. It can help with a lot of the common mental problems that we're seeing more and more these days. Not that we're seeing them more, but they're getting diagnosed, and it's okay to talk about them now.
Sometimes it was a little bit hush-hush, not to say, if you were like, oh, I'm feeling like this, I'm feeling like that. It's a little bit more, like you say, people are a little bit more open to chat about it and feel a little bit more comfortable getting it out there.
Yeah, and I think the people that were very anti-depression, like it was something where you could just cheer up, people are realising, because of the amount of quality information out there, that it's not like that. You can't just cheer yourself up out of depression, it needs specific work. And one of the things that I think is essential for mental health is sleep, and a good amount of sleep, and that'll be, again, something that I reckon we'll talk about in a few minutes.
So when you were chatting there about, obviously, if you feel as though your life is a little bit chaotic, do you think that on some level strength training can benefit people and their mental health, whether it just feels like they're not in a routine, they're just all taken up with work, so they can have that hour away where they can just be like, right, this is my actual little structure, this is the thing that they can control, compared to someone who maybe actually suffer with depression, who thinks, actually, I need something here to release that and make me feel a little bit better. Do you think it affects everyone depending on their level of depression or anything like that?
Well, I think the studies have shown that no matter how depressed someone is, no matter how anxious someone is, lifting weights does help with that. And I think it might not even be strength training, it might be anything that releases those endorphins. It might be running, it might be climbing, it might be lifting weights. The reason that I focus on strength training is because that's my speciality. That's something that helped me through my battles. It was a big battle with depression. I wouldn't say it's battles anymore, I think. It was something that was part of a specific part of my life that has since passed. And it was indeed strength training that massively helped me with that. And something that I was doing in some business mentoring recently was just speaking to someone about how chaotic they felt. And the reason that they felt so chaotic was because they didn't have a to-do list, so they didn't really know what was going on. When they were going to bed, they were wondering about what tasks they needed to do the next day. Then they wondered about like what would be the progress towards getting to where they want to be in the fitness industry. And I think training can be like that for someone that is suffering mental health problems, because it's like a physical to-do list. Mm-hmm. I've got to go in and do my squats, I've got to go in and do my bench press, I've got to methodically work through this towards something. And when people feel like they're going forward, a lot of the time some of the symptoms, some of the problems that people can have with mental illness can start to be alleviated. No, it's not going to help cure them if they have something wrong with their brain, if they're physiologically depressed, if it's something that's hormonal, but it can become one of those coping strategies. And if we can give people with clinical depression coping strategies to deal with the feelings, to deal with the thoughts, and to give them some escapism, then I think we can make a lot of good and a lot of positive changes in people's lives. Good,
that's the whole point of why we do what we do as coaches. Just sort of touching on that, so obviously this series is called Strength Chat. When you say strength training covers a broad type of exercise, when you say lifting weights to help with depression, you don't mean lifting maximally, do you? What do you mean by sort of, can it be absolutely anything, any type? You mentioned about the running, but in terms of lifting weights, is it just, could it be anything?
I think it can be anything. Something that I've heard spoken about is when you lift above a certain percentage, a certain hormone is released in your brain that helps you deal with stress and improves neuroplasticity. But that's something that I need to go away and research a little bit more. I think maximal loads give you, or the most you can lift, and improving the amount that you can lift can certainly give you a psychological boost. But sometimes with people you have the reverse of that. So they've been going for a 200 kilo deadlift for 6 months, and then they get that, and then it's like, well, what then? I've hit this 200 kilo deadlift, what should I do now? So I think if you are basing your mental health on getting a specific number, you need to have a plan for what to do afterwards. So when you set a goal of hitting a 200 kilo deadlift, maybe you have a plan to match that with a sumo deadlift, or maybe straight after that you plan to do some Olympic lifting or to do some strongman training or something like that. Plans need to be followed by plans. There need to be a series of those if you're dealing with maximal weights. But I think people can massively improve their mental health just by doing a general bodybuilding plan, by even doing something related to CrossFit but sensible. I've seen massive improvements in people's mental health when they've just been training weights, and it doesn't need to be about a 1 rep max, it could be about a 5 rep max, an 8 rep max. As long as they're feeling like they're working towards something and making themselves better, then they're going to see significant changes and improvements in their mental health. From what I've seen. And there has been people that have done weight training and they felt that it's made them worse, but often it falls into that category where they've hit a goal and then they don't know what to do afterwards. So if you're a coach and you're training someone with these mental problems, then you need to be aware of that fact that there will be a big drop off after a competition. A lot of coaches are familiar with the term competition blues, where a lifter will fall into a kind of post-competition depression, because they don't know what to do then. It's like the loss, they've been working towards something for so long, and suddenly you get very similar symptoms as you would for anxiety, depression, and other mental disorders. So you need to be very careful of that, so you don't make it so that lifting is feeding into those mental problems as well. They need to be used in a specific way that helps it and doesn't hinder someone's mentality.
So you mentioned there about having a goal of one to aim towards a 200 kilo deadlift or something like that. A big thing at the minute, or it was a big thing, is the whole thing about actual body image. So you've got to look a certain way or something like that. Do you think having performance goals can help people? Because people can suffer with anxiety. They don't, if you're doing before and after photographs, sometimes people don't want to take their shirt off, or they don't feel comfortable wearing something in the gym, or they don't want to be seen to be doing a certain exercise because it makes them look, or it gives them anxiety in the gym. Do you think giving people performance goals and just taking away that stigma of this is how you should look like if you're doing strength training or something like that, do you think it's good to have that performance goal?
Yeah.
Or how would you tackle that?
I think, I don't think aesthetic-based goals are the root of all evil. I think performance-related goals, again, it's about when that goal is achieved, having a continuous plan, always having things to work towards. And sometimes aesthetically based goals can work like that as well. Okay, so I can see this little bit of definition now, so let's do a bodybuilding competition, and then that has its own range of problems that can come with that as well. But yeah, I think when you're training for health and training for mental health, rather than being about how you look, most of the time people thrive when it's about how you feel, you feel when you hit a big personal best, how you feel when you're just getting better in the gym. And often aesthetic based goals can, when they're taken to their extreme, feed into a lot of mental problems. But then again, when it's losing 10 kilos worth of body fat, for example, and that makes a huge difference to someone's physique, but they're not starving, that can be a huge mental boost as well, because they're fitting into new clothes, they've got a good excuse to go on out and buy new clothes, they're feeling much better when they're naked, the sex life improves, they've got more energy. Like me, 2 months ago, I was going up a mountain in Crete, felt like I was nearly going to die. I've lost about 6 kilos from then, and now my life is a lot better. I do feel a lot more, there's a couple of other factors involved in this, but I feel mentally much healthier, because that is one of the reasons why I think I feel much better mentally, because I lost a little bit of weight from there. But I know that if I was to take that to the extreme and get into bodybuilding condition again, like I was a few years ago, that it would be a big risk. Party time.
We're having a rave. We are back on. I'm not gonna lie, that was a little bit creepy.
That was the creepiest thing that's ever happened in this room. And this is a locked door as well, so you can only imagine what has happened.
Anyway, back into the room. I think from that, obviously looking at those sort of goals, it's always good to look at that one win. Find that one win. So even if you do want to lose a little bit of weight, or you do want to add on a little bit of muscle to make yourself feel a little bit better, something is better than nothing. You've always got to think, I put half a kilo of muscle on, I'm half a kilo of muscle closer to where my goals are. I've lost a kilo of fat, I'm a kilo closer to where my fat is. So it's always trying to look and taking a win out of that. Because as well, if there's something positive, then that can help with mental health with that.
Definitely.
Too many times that when people come in, I've had clients before who have come in and they can't take a compliment. You give them a compliment, and sometimes
all the time
they'll just say, oh well, no, it was just by luck, it was just something like that. No, they've worked for that. You've got to take that win and try and find those positives. So going back to when you were saying at the start about some of the chats that you've been doing, a big thing is, again, like I said at the start, the training program and the exercises and programming is all well and good, is interesting, but again, mental health and stress can play a part, and also sleep. I think that sleep is probably one of the main things that get overlooked when it comes to people's training. And when I say to people, we'll have a look at your sleep, or we'll give you a sleep program, they're a little bit like, what, are you going to tell me how many snores I've got to do a night or something like that?
Absolutely.
Can you just chat a little bit more about let people know about what you mean about how sleep can affect your mental health, can affect your performance, and how much of a big role it plays?
So I started researching sleep a few months back when I was listening to a wonderful book called Why We Sleep. The name of the author escapes me right now, and what I started thinking about was, what can you change about someone's mental health as a personal trainer, as a strength coach? You can't get inside the head. You're not qualified to be a psychologist or a counsellor, even though sometimes we will fall into that role. I'm a big believer in, if it starts to stray into those territories, you do need to refer them to the proper professionals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what we can do and what we can influence is the amount of sleep that they have, because every trainer will know this. You can design the best plan in the world, and as soon as they have a night where they sleep, or consecutive nights where they have to sleep for 2 hours instead of 8, they're a complete different person. Suddenly they're far more anxious than they usually would be. Suddenly they're a lot more depressed. Sleep has been shown to increase the incidence of suicidal thoughts, which these are the exact symptoms of suicidal depression.
Mm-hmm.
So it's my thought that a lot of people who are diagnosed with depression are really struggling with sleep, and if they were able to sleep better, if they realised that they were chronically sleep deprived, we could see a big removal of a lot of these symptoms. And indeed I think we could save a lot of lives by really highlighting the importance of sleep. And a lot of people go around saying, I can get around just fine sleeping 6 hours a day, and it's my argument that those people have never got into a routine where they've been able to sleep 7.5, 8 hours to see how that changes them psychologically. So I decided that I was going to do a little experiment. I was going to stop working early on a Tuesday morning. I was going to stop getting up at 4 a.m. and work until 10 p.m. and just see how that affected me psychologically, so I could then go on and talk about it. My hope was that it would make me feel much better. And instantly, as soon as that started to happen, I suddenly started getting anxiety attacks in my previous job because of various things, like the way that the gym was run. It wasn't the one there Steve's at now, it was a different one. I was having not panic attacks, but feeling panicky all the time. And one of the reasons that was because I was chronically sleep deprived, and then started sleeping 7.5, 8 hours, prioritising sleep, supplementing with ZMA, making sure that we had blackout curtains and removing any blue light in the room as well really helped. And suddenly we see this massive relieving of these symptoms, and I started looking at my clients and how sleep correlated with their performance in the gym. And we started to notice that whenever that they were low on sleep, that's when they would more likely get injured, that's when they'd make mistakes, that's when they'd go off the diet, because we know that sleep and a lack of it increases your cravings. It changes your perception of whether you're hungry, whether you're thirsty. And one of the big things with performance and injury is perception of risk. If you go for something and you've misjudged the risk of it, then that presents a specific problem. You're more likely to get hurt. And when you're sleep deprived, your sense of risk and your ability to perceive risk is hugely changed. So it's like when you take a lot of pre-workout and you're just going to get that weight up no matter what. You think, oh, yeah, I can do that. And then you get hurt, and then you feel like a cripple, and then that feeds into that depressive and unempowered place where people can be. Like, that's the worst thing for mental health, when you feel like you're 20 years older than you actually are. When you hurt your back and you're suddenly having to do these remedial rehab exercises, and suddenly you feel like all the work that you've done has been removed. And I think sleep deprivation massively increases the chances of you hurting yourself at the gym. And another crazy thing about sleep is the more sleep deprived you are, the less you are able to judge how sleep deprived you are. So until you get into that place where you're not sleep deprived, you have no real idea of just how much risk you're putting yourself under, or just how bad your body feels. Another reason why it affects mental health so much is because when you are sleep deprived, you are more likely to view people's actions as hostile towards you. So if you have a coach and you're sleep deprived and they tell you that you need to elevate your heels when you squat, you're more likely to take that as a personal attack. rather than basically go towards
is that a little bit more sign of paranoia then? For that
oh yeah, like being sleep deprived massively increases your degree of paranoia. You can get hallucinations, you can get all sorts, and it can mirror a lot of mental disorders when you're that sleep deprived, and there's a reason why it's used as a kind of torture.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And you can't see the damage on the surface either. It's one of those things where a couple of nights sleep and then someone can at least look much better, but when you are sleep deprived and it's gone on for so long, the damage is done. After that, it's only really slight improvements that you can make. You can never get that sleep back again, so that's why I think it's so important to address sleep, especially with young athletes, and not everyone, right from the get-go. And there's a reason why most animals in nature sleep. If sleep wasn't needed, then there would be no reason for that really dangerous evolutionary trait to keep existing. It'd be much easier and it'd be much safer for an organism to stay awake all the time, so it's far less likely to get injured. Even dolphins can turn half their brain to sleep at once, so they can just basically switch sides as they go.
That's why dolphins are cool.
That's why dolphins are really cool. I think there's some interesting studies about REM sleep with dolphins and how they don't seem to have any REM sleep, but that's a complete other subject from there. So yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's something that's massively underrated, and I think it's something that's people don't really see its importance because they just say, oh, I can just have an hour's less sleep and I'll just be a little bit tired, but that's not the case at all. I think there's so many more ramifications of it that it's worth getting enough sleep to be able to both perform at your best and to feel at your best.
Absolutely. Going back to saying at the start, you know, if you're in if you feel as though your life is a little bit of chaos, but you think that is your routine of, right, I'm going to work, like what Chris mentioned, about 6 a.m. till 10 o'clock at night, then I want to go home and then I want to do a little bit more work at home. The amount of clients or people that are here that do a full day's work, then they'll go home and then they'll do a little bit more work, that ends up being their routine. To get out of that, you know, going to the gym for an hour, and then I'll say to people, okay, how are you feeling today? If you're not feeling right, if you're feeling really tired, if you're feeling really stressed, the best thing might be to do is to do a little bit of foam rolling. Then just go home, sleep, rest. That's how you're gonna get better. I've said before in other episodes, to build muscle, to get stronger, it's what happens outside of the gym. So what you're eating, how you're sleeping, that's how your muscle gets built. That's how you recover, and that's how you get better.
Just thought of something actually. Whenever I have students as part of my clientele, it comes up to the time when it's exam time. Every trainer's had students, and you know that their life is absolute chaos. They're going to be trying to cram in as much information as possible. They're going to be having exam after exam after exam, and there's going to be a hell of a lot of stress. Sleep deprivation is one of those stresses as well, and as soon as we come up to that period, I've got a guy called James Harmon Thomas who not only is about to have his second child, but is also going to...
Great guy, by the way.
Great guy. And he's just passed all his exams now, and we just communicated that we didn't expect any personal bests. I didn't even want him to go near any personal best during that time because his body cannot be relied upon at that time. Mm-hmm. So if someone's sleep deprived, the actual answer that they give you when you say, are you feeling okay, to a large degree can't really even be relied upon because the answers that they're giving are completely skewed by the amount that they're not.
So then that way, using James as an example, that is where training becomes as a little bit of a de-stressor to take the mind from being dead cloudy, so that when he leaves the gym, he can then go and concentrate on his studies and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and life is so fast at the moment. Like when you do work more and more and more hours, you get used to bumping from one thing to the next, and there's nothing that actually slows you down. Mm-hmm. And I think this is why strength training can be so important, because you know there's the famous you need 2.5 minutes rest, or 3.5, or 4.5, or 5.5. And with my lifters, I often communicate that in that time that you rest in between sets, I do want you to purposefully slow down, sit, process your thoughts, just let the session happen, take your time with it. If it takes 2 hours, like great. That's 2 hours where you've slowed down the pace of life a little bit, and you
when
can
no one's bothering you for 2 hours.
Exactly, and there's this big thing with Gary Gary V, about hustle, and I think a lot of people misunderstand that and think that you need to just work more and more and more and more, whereas I think it should just be about working more productively for the same amount of time, and people don't realise that your productivity goes down when you sleep less. If you're sleeping 5 hours, you're going to make so many more mistakes. You're not going to, if you're in business, again, your perception of risk is going to be massively skewed as well. So people need to get that sleep to be as productive as they can possibly be, and also to mean that their performance will be much better when they're sleeping properly as well. And that needs to be a sustained thing. Even if you're losing 1 hour per night of sleep, the pernicious effects of that just add up and add up and add up, and you will end up in a chronically sleep-deprived state without even really realising it. And the only time that you'll realise you were sleep-deprived is afterwards, when you've sorted out all the habits and everything.
So, for people listening, I found that quite interesting. I know for me, some mornings I'll be up dead early. An example is, I came and met Chris for this episode. I didn't get a very good night's sleep last night. I'm not feeling in a very good state to train. I know it's not going to be a very good session. I know that I've got some bigger and more important training sessions coming up for a competition that I'll be doing. So some of the things that Chris has highlighted resonate with me, and if you're listening, there might be some things there that you can relate to as well. So what are the take-home points that you want people to take away from this episode, Chris?
I think work smartly and work effectively by getting the right amount of sleep. Sleep needs to be focused on. You can't just get by on 6 hours per day or anything like that. It needs to be emphasised that you need to be getting towards 8 hours. See how that affects your mental health. One of the things that I want you to take away is don't just go to sleep aids, because what they do is they give you something called rebound insomnia. And it's to do with the receptors that the sleep aids bind to, and the downregulation of hormones that cause sleep. As soon as you come off those sleep aids, it's suddenly much harder to sleep. Something that I want people to go and look at is a website called the Sleep Council, which has some amazing advice for if you work nights, if you work shifts, because there's some people, and I really feel for these people, like doctors in this country that are required to work a ridiculous amount of hours, and they're in a position where they are so sleep deprived, and people wonder why there's so many mistakes made in the NHS. I mean, that's how far-reaching sleep is. Mm-hmm. It's going to kill people because of our doctors being in such a sleep-deprived state. They're having to, like, I've had clients where they've had an hour sleep and they're expecting to get personal bests in the gym, and they come in and they're pale, and they can't process a thought. You try and teach them a new exercise, and it's just all over the place. You see their attention span goes like that, and if they're like the cleverest minds apparently in the country, they're just being tortured with this amount of sleep. And I think there's people out there that are trying to work harder and harder, and they're just doing that torture to themselves. Like we talk about how awful doctors have it, but there's a lot of people doing that to themselves by choice. And that needs to stop. And if you're an athlete out there trying to get personal best, trying to win world championships and everything, you need to focus on your sleep. Otherwise, you're never truly going to know how well you can perform. And there's athletes out there that, yes, they've had children and they're definitely not going to sleep many hours, and that's because a baby's circadian rhythm is completely different to an adult's circadian rhythm, and that will suck. So in those periods of time where you are sleep deprived, train around it. Have some time where you go with a little bit lower percentages, or have a coach that can tell you to wind your training down around a specific period, like exams, like around a birth, like around times of really high stress, or when you move house or anything like that, because that's something that massively affects sleep as well, being knocked out of a routine. So
Yeah.
if you know that you're going to be massively knocked out of a routine, you need to deal with that and accept there's going to be some kind of sleep deprivation and change your training accordingly. Unless there's something massive coming up like the Olympics or something like that, something that you're not going to get the chance to do again. If you're sleep deprived, you're still going to have to do it because you never know when you're going to get the opportunity again. But that being said, if you have just a regional powerlifting competition and it's coming just after the birth of a child or it's around exam time, just pick the next competition, do something like that. Take the brakes off a little bit, allow yourself just to chill. And most importantly, don't over hustle yourself. Don't think that just by working more and more and more and for longer and longer hours you can get more stuff done. You can't, because everything's going to go wrong. You're going to
Quality, not quantity.
Exactly. And there's definitely a point where that stops. You can't just have 1 hour of really quality stuff and get exactly where you want to be in your life. Like, you can still work really fucking hard, I don't know if we're allowed to swear, for like 8 hours and then stop and then get a really good night's sleep and then be able to hit it again the next day without completely burning out after about a month or whatever. So that was a little bit longer than I anticipated for my summary.
A couple of take-home points there. And you actually do have a chat coming up down here at Graft House about sleep. So if people want to hear a little bit more, want to come down and ask you some questions about how they can improve their sleep or anything like that, where can they find you? What are the details?
So I'm at a gym called Graft House, which is a little gym in Leeds, and we have an event with a organisation called Mental Health Muscle, where on the 4th of August we're going to do a series of talks. We've got Josh Greenfield coming down, who's an amazing powerlifter. We've got Callie Thornton, we've got a few nutrition companies and everything like that. And the whole day is about bringing awareness about mental health and how strength training can affect your mental health, how powerlifting has saved certain people's lives. I'm going to be talking at 10:30 a.m. until either 11 or 11:15, depending on how long I'm allowed to ramble on for. And then from there, we'll see. So it's either a £5 entry, or anyone that's just coming down to see the talks, they can just bob in and you can jump in on those.
Okay. So if anything that myself and Chris have covered in this episode, if you want to go down to the event on the 4th of August, I would probably recommend coming down, asking Chris questions, seeing how it can be helped. If you've got any questions at all that you want to send directly to me or to Chris, just comment below. And as always, thanks for listening. Thanks to Chris, and we will see you next week.
Thanks very much for having me, Steve. It's been awesome.